Hey everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys another episode of Meta Monday, the first Meta Monday of the new season. So we're gonna go over the top ladder decks right now, how they're performing, and we're also gonna go over tournaments that happen this weekend. So I'm gonna try a slightly different format, or do a little bit of extra things in this Meta Monday. I'm gonna take some inspiration from I've gotten into Pokemon VGC kind of recently, a couple months ago, and so I watched this guy named Joey, his Meta Mondays. He has like, he doesn't do Meta Mondays. He just kind of does like meta updates after big tournaments and stuff like that. And so I'm going to try to take some inspiration from his style and add a couple of those things into these Meta Mondays to give you guys a little bit, just more information and overall, hopefully, just higher quality content. But before we get into the Meta Monday, I wanted to remind you guys that 68% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to me. So if you could do me a huge favor and click that subscribe button, it'll help me out so much with the YouTube algorithm. Comment down below what decks you've been enjoying in this meta, and leave a like and subscribe, all that type of stuff. It helps me out a lot. I'm getting, like I said, going really hard into the competitive season. If you're coming back to competitive, now is the time to do it. This would be the best time to get back into competitive LoR during this beta season to kind of see how everything works, get your bearings again, so that way when the real first season comes back, you are ready to go and just hit the ground running. So yeah, so let's get into the Meta Monday. So first things first is we're just going to go over the ladder statistics, so you can know if you're just, if you're not really interested in tournaments, but you want to play a lot of ladder. It kind of tells you what decks have been doing well. It generalized gives us an idea of what the good decks are in the meta. So number one, most played deck in the game right now is Orange Jax. Not surprising. The deck's new and it got buffed and it's pretty good. Orange Jax is fairly good. It relies a lot on making a really large unit on like turn 3 or turn 4. Your opponent kind of has to chum block it forever. If that large unit got overwhelmed from, like, if you played Combat Cook and it gave you overwhelm weapon, that could be a huge problem for you if you just made a really big Jax. Like if you go turn 1 Weaponsmith, turn 2 Jax, you have a 4/3 Jax, and then if you buff it again, like your Jax gets really big really quickly, the weapon gets really big, the weapon gets overwhelmed once Jax levels, so you have a 1 mana +3/+3/+4/+4 weapon that grants overwhelm to one of your other units, and it's big chillin'. And yeah, the best matchups right now are going to be kind of just like random mid-range stuff, like stuff that you're just simply bigger than. Like you can get bigger than it really quickly, your opponents can't really deal with it. Your worst matchups are going to be things that can just like stop your very few threats. So like Ryze is really good into this deck because typically you only have a couple like really big threats, like maybe 1 or 2. The rest are just kind of medium-sized threats. And Ryze has, a bunch of stuns. So if I just have to stun, 1 or 2 big units every turn starting turn 5, then I'm perfectly fine with that. Field Rush is kind of the same idea as like they just Vengeance. You don't play Spell Shields or Deny or anything in Jax Orange because you just don't have access to that. So Field Rush kind of just waits for you to make one really big unit, and it makes you wait for you to make one really big unit, and then they Vengeance it, or they Quietus your really big like Bone Claw or something like that, because Quietus is still good, weapon destruction. Very solid into that deck. Alawi, Twisted Fate, Ionia. So Pink Alawi's pretty solid. It's definitely not like a broken deck. You see right here, it's slightly less win rate than Orange, barely 50% win rate deck. It's definitely not broken. People that say Pink Alawi is like broken because of like Syncopation and Twin and Deny and all that stuff that's just a Reddit take. I think the deck is definitely good. It's definitely not broken by any means. You can interact with it. Alawi decks are pretty solid and pretty cool, but you have to remember that we've been in this meta before with Alawi decks, and we know how to beat Alawi decks. Any deck that actually can interact with them just kind of kills them. Any deck that interacts with them before they get set up with big tentacles just beats them. Like, you see here at J-Timer, you just like kill the early game stuff, and then they don't have really big stuff, so Syncopation matters less and Ghost matters less. TF Swain, Norra, like Flock decks here. Elise Gwen kind of just like can run over them, especially with Fearsomes. Oh, another Flock deck. This is Pirate Aggro, because again, you're just too fast for them. Like you make them have to trade away their stuff, and they don't just get these big tentacles. Like the thing is if you let them just like mope around and get their really big tentacle, then like, yeah, if you let them have like a 5/5 tentacle and an Alawi in play, then sure, you can have a hard time dealing with that, depending on your type of deck that you're playing. If you don't just have like hard removal, or if you don't like actually pressure them in any sort of way or pressure their resources. A big tip is pressure it on your turn. So that way, if they Syncopation you, you don't just get like blown out and take 20 damage. A lot of times people make this mistake of like, oh, I'll just wait to like Vengeance the Alawi on the attack turn and stuff like that. And they do that, they syncopation, and then now, not only did you like miss your Vengeance, but you're going to be taking, you probably like misblocked, and you're going to be taking a bunch of damage for it. So if you Vengeance or do stuff on your turn, then if they syncopation or do some like crazy combat trick, you know, like, okay, well, at least, you know, it's on my turn and it's not, I'm not getting attacked by, you know, big overwhelm Malawi type thing. But you see here, yeah, it's just bad into the flock decks that kind of deal damage to things. It's good into the other mid-range decks where you just want to get bigger. It's like okay into the like the big SI Freljord control decks, because SI the big SI decks just play like Vengeance as their only like real removal spells. Like this Trundle Tryndamere deck is like, yeah, 3 Vengeance and that's it. Like Vile Feast isn't doing anything, Quietus isn't doing anything. So you have 3 removal spells and then it costs 6 mana. So by the time you can actually even play that, they just have, you know, syncopation, deny, something like that up. So that's why it's good into those style decks. But you see here, like Jace Hyber, it's good into, because what does Jace Hyber play? It plays Thermogen, it plays Quietus to get rid of early like tentacles and stuff like that. Has Aloof Travelers to get rid of any type of top end. Plays Telsos to deal 3 damage to stuff. It plays Shock Blast to deal 3 damage. Piercing Darkness to deal like 5 damage. So it has ways like, you starting turn 3 you can start killing stuff. Their 3/3 that makes an overwhelm tentacle is probably the like one of the scariest things that they have. And on turn 3 you have like a good your entire deck is based around dealing 3 damage on turn 3. So your entire deck is built around killing something on turn 3, and you're not too worried about that. Worst case scenario, you just pass, wait for them to play Alawi, and then boom, now you have an answer to Alawi. Also, I think Alawi is like a 2/6, so having Hex Obliterator lines up really well, because Hex Obliterator deals 6 damage to it. So that's pretty good. Astral Blanc obviously just plays like a shit ton of Frostbites and Burst Speed. You can't syncopation around that. TF Swain and Norra Swain just makes infinite blockers, and they only have one overwhelm attacker, which is Alawi. And if they do have the overwhelm guy, you can just probably kill it. But Alawi is kind of slow, so you can't just chump block forever. A block with Alawi, you don't even have to like do anything crazy. You can just straight up block with Alawi and threaten like a Disintegrate on it, and that's it. Or you can just block with Alawi and then like try to Ravenous Flock it, and then they go, haha, I have syncopation. You're like, okay, well, it was 1 mana flock anyways, I'll just like kill it with another card later on. You know, Broadmane turns everything into Ravenous Flock, so they can only have so many removal spells. Like, you have so many more ways to deal 1 damage and kill things with your Broadmane in play than they have syncopations and denies and barrier tricks and stuff like that. So that's why the Flock Broadmane decks are just very good into it. Number 3, we're going to kind of go faster because there's a lot to cover, so I'm not going to go super in-depth on all of the decks, by the way, just like the kind of newer decks that explain to you guys what's going on. Because the decks like, you know, Katarina, Gwen, Annie, Pirates, like Plunder, like we've seen all these decks for months now, so I'm not going to go super in-depth on those. Number 3 is Katarina, Gwen, Red Gwen. So like I said, not going to go too in-depth on this. I believe it's like, yeah, literally the exact same deck with the Might, Mark of the Isle combo, no new cards, no new nothing. People are trying to go back to the Harrowing version because of how controlly the matchup, the meta is right now, and Harrowing is like the best card historically to beat Noxus Control. So Harrowing is your best way to beat Noxus Control decks, but it usually isn't enough right now. But that is like your only way to win against Noxus Control. Ryze. So Ryze is still not that great of a deck. You see here 52% win rate. If you see here, actually the whole meta is like really healthy. 53%, 52%, 52%, 52%. Like the top 3 decks are the most played, also just like aren't OP, which is really cool to see. You see how they're all like fairly balanced. But we will look at Ryze. So Ryze is doing fairly okay, you know, 50%. The top players do have really high win rates, like Majin over here with 80% win rate. But I want it to be said that I don't think Ryze is broken. It's just I think the meta favors him really well right now. Norra has exploded in the metagame, which we'll see in the tournament stats up here too. Norra has exploded in the metagame. Orange Jax, like I said earlier, only plays like 2 threats. See, its worst matchup is literally Ryze. And what Ryze excels at games that are kind of slow and grindy and go past turn 5, where he's not pressured like 6 wide, or he's not pressured 6 wide by like decently sized units. Like Norra decks can go 6 wide, but it's usually like a bunch of 1/2s and 2/2s and stuff like that that kind of don't matter. there's not really many decks that do go wide. Decks that do go wide, they'll absolutely smoke it. You see here, like Lurk, 16% win rate, like, is atrocious. This year, Relia go super wide. Said Hecarim go super wide. Burn, aggro, burn, aggro, burn, aggro. Like, these burn and aggro decks go super wide. Even like the mid-range decks, like Alawi, you know, is mid-range deck goes wide. Katarina Gwyn goes wide. Rumble Vayne. That doesn't go wide, but it just kind of like kills you on turn 4. Yeah, decks like that just kind of beat it, but it does beat, you know, Anivia Control and Ashe LeBlanc, where you play like 1 unit a turn starting turn 4. You know, Deep, you don't even play a threat until turn 7. Norra deck, you don't play any threats. Jax Orin, you play 1 threat a turn, or like 1 to 2 threats an entire game, and they just stun it. You don't play any threats, no threats, no threats, no threats. Again, you play like 1 threat starting like turn 4 or something. You don't play any threats until turn 8. They just have to die also. So if it's if your only like counterplay to them is if that's there to try and blow up their landmarks, and then they just deny it, and then you lose the game. No threats, no threats. Again, you don't play a threat until like turn 5. No threats, no threats. So very just common. It's not that Ryze got really, really good. It's just that people are playing decks right now that are really bad into Ryze. Ryze is a really, really, really good tournament deck. And then on ladder, it's just an extremely polarizing deck. You see all its good matchups are like super good, and you see the bad matchups are like super bad. Like right now, we don't have a lot of like the most amount of what is it called? Like sample size for some of these, but still like 16% win rate against Lurk, like 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 29, 30. Like your first like 9 worst matchups are all 30% or lower. And then your first 6, 7, your first 7 matchups are 70% or higher. Like Ryze is just an extremely polarizing deck. And that's all it is too. It's basically like slot machine. And slot machine the deck. You either load up in that loading screen, you either won the game or you lost the game. Anivia is coming back because Soul Cleave. Deck is still bad. Don't play Anivia. Anivia has never been good. Anivia is just horrible. 45% win rate. Very bad deck. Pirates, 57% win rate. I don't think Pirates are back or necessarily like broken. I think it's just aggro decks are really good at beating stuff. Reveler's Feast, I will say, is like a super broken card. So I think as soon as we find a way to actually use Reveler's Feast correctly in a shell that like really, really abuses this card, people will realize how broken Reveler's Feast is, but I just think it's super underexplored right now. GP Sejuani, Plunder, nothing is. It's going to have a higher win rate right now, 53%, just because, it's an established, refined deck playing against random new decks. Swain Norra, don't play Swain. Swain's a bad card, but this shell is really good. Broadmane decks are kind of dominating at the moment. The reason you don't play Swain is because Leviathan is just a really bad card, and Swain forces you to play Leviathan. Broadmane just turns all of your removal spells into vengeances, and then so you turn your entire deck into 1-mana vengeance, and it's very good. And we will go over that in the tournament meta once we talk about it up here. And yeah, and that's the top 8, and 9 is another Norra deck. So what do we notice out of this? The meta right now, so we're going to open up good old Notepad, and we're going to bring this over here. So the meta right now is either go tall decks. So this is like your Orangeax, your Alawis. Yeah, it's your Orangeax and your Alawis are like the most popular decks right now. So this go tall just means like have big units. So you just want to have like just the biggest unit you can and force your opponent to have to deal with it. But it's typically only like 1 to 2 threats. Then you have your kill, or we'll just call them like flock decks, because you have your flock decks that go ahead, and this is going to be like your Broadmane, essentially your Broadmane decks. I should call it just like Broadmane decks. So Broadmane, kills very large units and just like suffocates your opponent out, which we'll talk about that more here in a moment. And then you have your Ryze, like it literally is just Ryze. So this is the triangle that we're in right now. So triangle meta, and then so we'll call this like anti Broadmane decks, and that's gonna be your Ryze, your Feel the Rush, your Darkness / Norra Vigar decks. I think I spelled Vigar wrong. I think it's E-I. I don't know, man. That just looks weird, but I think that's right. So this is kind of what the meta looks like right now. This is your triangle. So in card games, you're typically in a triangle. Triangle doesn't necessarily mean just like 3 decks only. It can mean like, it just usually means like 3 style of decks or 3 play styles, and then there can be multiple decks inside of that. But this is what the triangle looks like right now. Is you have your really go tall decks, you have your decks that beat your go tall decks, you have your anti decks that are your like anti Broadmane decks, and then your gold tall decks typically beat these, but not always. And then you kind of just have your like, you're just like aggro / pressure decks. There you go. And this is our this is going to be your like Lurk, Pirates, Red Gwyn, Wonder. And this is going to be your like anti Broadmane type deck. So these are the decks that pressure these decks a lot. These decks are going to smoke these decks because you're just bigger than them. These decks are going to beat these decks and these decks just because you have infinite removal spells. And that's basically the triangle we're in, but it's like 4 decks, so it's kind of a square type circle thing. Yeah, so that's what we're in right now, and we're going to go over tournament meta to kind of show you exactly what that looks like. Hello, Winston. Can I help you? So, tournament meta. So, we are, this is going to be the first one we're looking at. There were 2 tournaments this weekend. There was OLS 55, and there was Aegis Esports Beta Season Kickoff. This tournament had a larger prize pool, so I'll be going over it first at $250 prize pool, which is 2.5 times the OLS prize pool. I'm going to let Winston outside real quick. Come here, buddy. This one had the bigger price pool, and this is also the one where I think higher quality of players were in. I'm not dissing OLS or the players in OLS. It's just I know that there were many more like top players in this one because the price pool is higher. So we will take a look at this to look at for a more like accurate meta description, and then we'll look at OLS and say it'll look at that meta and see how the tournament's metas line up, and it is actually really crazy how they line up. So first, we have this breakdown. This website's amazing. We have this breakdown that shows you the regions, most played champions, most broad archetypes. So there were 87, I believe. So 79, and then 70 or 79, 80, 81. Yeah, 87. So there were 87 total lineups. So 87 players. Out of those 87 lineups, Norra was brought 40 times. Twisted Fate was brought 39 times. The region combination of Noxus, Bandle City was brought 36 times, so almost 50% of players brought this lineup. And then Bilgewater Noxus was brought at almost the exact same ratio. I would have, if I had to guess, I would say probably in the exact same lineups most of the time. As far as archetypes go, you can see the most popular deck here was Swain TF. The second most popular deck is Norra. Now, the reason Norra is only at 20, and you see like, oh, but Bandle City Noxus is so high, it's because the other 16 players were going to be on Norra Swain, but Swain is just worse. The region Noxus was brought 110 times, over whatever the amount of, I think that's like, looks impressive, but it's like 87 times 3 is the amount of decks, and then the region Noxus showed up in 100 of them, so I think it's about a third of the decks total. Ravenous Flock cards. Look at these cards registered. You have Ravenous Flock was registered 227 times, or 227 copies, and then the next copy is literally 50 less. Like, is that not insane? There's 50 less copies of the second most played card in this meta, or in this tournament, and the most played card is Ravenous Flock. So what does that tell you? That should tell you Flock good. So we'll go over tournament meta takeaways. So Flock good. We have double Flock lineup is good. So double Flock or triple Flock lineup is good. It was very much brought a lot. So you see here again, these 2 decks were brought at almost the same time, or almost the same amount. Again, probably the most common. We'll get down to the actual lineup breakdown here in a moment. But I would guess they were probably brought together a lot of the time. So double or triple flock, very good. Battle City Noxus was good. Bilgewater Noxus is good. And then the third flock lineup, a lot of people went with the PNZ, I think was the most common third flock. And then if you didn't want to do third flock, people kind of just found a third deck that beat Ornn and Alawi. But yeah, having a way, basically being on this triple anti-go tall and aggro decks was the answer. Because in this like triangle style thing, like you said, these things beat each other. The thing is the Broadmane decks kind of beat everything that's not these. So Broadmane decks beat the go tall decks, and they beat the aggro pressure decks. But like you're going to lose to these control decks. But if you're not against exactly one of these control decks or some variant of SI control, you're kind of just going to win because you beat any cold tall deck, any flavor, even if it's like an off-meta cheese or off-meta like weird deck that you've never seen before. You probably still just beat it because you have infinite blockers, infinite removal spells. Same with aggro and pressure and stuff like this. You're going to beat these decks because you just play like infinite removal spells and chump blockers. So you can match aggro's tempo and then you just have like an infinitely better late game because you have real late game cards. I mean, while aggro is top decking 1-drops on turn 6, So I'm gonna be pretty happy with that. So double flock, good. Norra, really good. And we can go over why Norra is good because chump blockers / stall, real good. Yeah, Norra was kind of coming to the meta because Kane left. A lot of these like hyper the like challenger units left, the like hyper pressure decks that like go tall with overwhelm aren't really existent. So overwhelm would have been like an insane bring this weekend if these decks also didn't have 10 million removal spells. But overwhelm was very much like a problem keyword. Overwhelm and fearsome are problem keywords for this deck. But overwhelm is not very common, though. I think a couple of these go tall decks have overwhelm. Like I said, like Jax Ornn typically has like 1, maybe 2 overwhelm units. And then Alawi has like basically Alawi and then maybe a tentacle if they draw a 3/3, and then you don't somehow kill the 3/3. So overall, like without those keywords in the metagame and with the metagame slowing down a little bit, Norra got really, really, really good. And so now we'll just go over the most popular lineups. So the most popular lineups was TF Swain, Norra, and Annie Katarina. There was, my camera is kind of in the way. Maybe we can zoom out here so you guys can see the numbers. Okay, well you can't. Okay, well you can see all the numbers but the one, so we'll just keep it 100%, and I'll just tell you. You'll have to believe me. This had 7 total people brought this exact lineup. My team was half of them. We brought there's 3 of us, and we brought this exact lineup. So we were 3 out of the 7. So 4 people, even without us, had the exact same lineup. Oh wait, no, we didn't play Swain. Actually, Jordan played Swain. We played TF Katarina. So this actually wasn't our lineup. We played this one right here. Okay, so we were actually, me and Drizoth brought this lineup. The Annie Ezreal, TF Katarina, Norra. So we were these 2 players right here. And then Jordan brought this lineup up here of the like Annie Katarina, Norra, TF Swain. So it's literally like the exact same lineup. So if you look down here, really, this lineup was brought 9 times. It's just slightly different choices. I do think these decks were better. I think the Annie Ezreal deck could be tweaked a little more. Like it's not having a Loof in it, stuff like that. But I definitely think you don't want to playing Swain right now. Like Swain stocks down. Levy, bad card. Always has been bad card. So Leviathan's a very bad card, especially in a meta where things cost 7 mana. Just don't, like, they better be winning you the game on the spot, because if you play a 7 mana flock against, if you play a 7 mana Leviathan against any of these flock decks, I'm just going to spend 3 mana to kill it. If you spend 7 mana flock against, I don't know why I keep saying flock. If you spend 7 mana Leviathan against any control deck, they're just going to like vengeance it on the spot. If you play 7 mana card into any aggro deck, you're not playing it because you're probably dead, because you're playing with -1 card for the entire game because you opened with a 7 mana card. And yeah, Leviathan has just like never been a good card. It's always been it's always felt bad to have to play Leviathan because you're playing Swain. And so then your option is like, well, just play Swain without Leviathan. And it's like, just play Broadmane at that point. Like just play just play a better or as good, same level as good as Swain champion, but just don't have to play the Leviathan card, and you're looking pretty good. But yeah, so that's the takeaway here. What ended up winning this was actually not a flock deck. I think there was 29 copies of Broadmane in top 8 or something like that. And then what ended up winning it was like Shurima. Does this show you the winners? It doesn't. But what ended up winning it was like Lee Sin, Uxin. So Shurima, Ionia, Lee Sin. Some crazy stuff. Let me go find it here. Santiago always has all this stuff. So if you're on Twitter and you're wanting to get into competitive LoR, 10 out of 10. I cannot recommend following Santiago more than I already recommend following Santiago. So he goes over everything. So P, so this is for OLS. So we'll just pop that open here. We're going to reset that. So let's see. Where is... Nope, that's not it. That's not it. Where is... Yep, right here. Stolen Conch. So Stolen Conch won it right here. He won Aegis. And he brought Ryze, Twist Fate Alawi, and Shurima. Oh, no, this is not his lineup. Oh, sorry. This is the wrong one. That's OLS. So I was saying, I didn't think he brought Ryze. That's kind of cringe. So yeah, so he brought Uxin, Lee Sin, Viego, Evelyn, and then he brought a Spectral Matron combo with TLC. And what this did is this very much like beat flock decks. This beat flock decks really hard because flock decks don't have a great time into Lee Sin because of just how much safe or how many spells they have. With this version of Lee Sin, I can see it being an okay try to beat it, but with the amount of like paydays giving it spell shield on top of Lee Sin already having barrier, so it's kind of hard to damage him, it's really rough. So this is very much an anti-flock lineup. So when you enter this lineup into a top 8 that has 29 copies of Broadmane, you're looking to be pretty set on winning the meta at that point. So that's what won that. And so now we'll go over OLS. OLS, completely different meta. As we see here, the most copied cards are Vengeance and Vile Feast. A lot of Shadow Isles. There was a lot of Shadow Isles in this tournament. So we saw Aegis was just Ravenous Flock the tournament, where Noxus, most played regions, Noxus Bandle City, Noxus Bilgewater, Norra, Twisted Fate, Katarina Sway, Nar. These were all like in the same lineup, essentially all in the same 2 decks. What do you see when you go over to OLS? Oh, you see the same like top 3, top 4. This is all the same, right? Oh, wait a minute. There's a Trundle here. Why is there a Trundle here? Top played regions. Wait. Bandle City Noxus isn't number 1? Shadow Isle is Fairlord is number 2? Like what? The most brought archetype was Field Rush. Second most brought archetype, Jax Orn. Come over here. What are the top 2 brought archetypes? Noxus Control. Over here, you have the mid-range Go Tall deck, and then you have anti-mid-range Go Tall and anti-Flock. We're in a completely different metagame here. Not really completely different metagame. What happened was people were countering the Flock decks in this tournament, and in this tournament, people brought the Flock decks. So if all of these people would have just entered this tournament, they would have been big chillin'. They would have just dominated. But yeah, so this looks like a reverse meta call, where it's like all the people tried to counter the Noxus decks. So that's also the takeaway from Conch is to beat Broadmane decks can lose. They are easy to counter. You just have to play the right decks. And then here you see here, that's what people did. People brought a lot of counter decks. That's very interesting. So this had, like I said, the first one had 87 players. This one had 62 players. One thing I forgot to point out the other time was, so it's still a decently sized tournament, 62 players, almost the same size, is look at how many unique decks or unique lineups. So I don't actually know, I don't really know how to tell you the amount of unique decks, but as far as unique lineups go, look at this. There is obviously like 7 copies of this, 2-2. So our first 3 lineups are all duplicates with 2 people on each of these lineups, 7 people on this lineup. But then it immediately goes down to 1. Not a single lineup after those 3 are duplicated. Every other person, so there's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 out of the 87. So out of the 87 players we had, 76 of them are on unique lineups, which is like so insanely cool. 76 unique lineups very, very cool. I should show you how open the meta is and how just balanced the meta is. Very solid. Same thing here. So out of the 62 lineups, 61 of them were unique. There was only one duplicated lineup. The rest were just completely unique lineups, which is very, very, very cool in my opinion. So yeah, so not much to go over there because we went over most of it in Aegis. It's just that we'll go over the winner's deck. So the winner's decks was, again, so Norra Viego, Ryze, and Alawi, Pink Alawi. So this looks like 2/3 counter to Ravenous Flock. This lineup is kind of not very coherent because like this deck is really good into the mid-range like go big decks. This deck is really good into like the mid-range go big decks, but then like Alawi. And then they're just like playing Pink Alawi for some reason, which I guess if you draw super well, it doesn't matter. But we almost saw the same thing with Conch here, where they have the triple anti-Broadmane lineup, but then they just randomly have Alawi here, so I'm not going to call it an anti-Broadmane lineup because Alawi has like a 20% win rate into good Broadmane players. So yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting lineup though. They probably just brought 3 decks that were like good decks. Like all 3 of these decks are good that they're very comfortable with and kind of just went to work on it. So very happy about very happy that we saw 2 different lineups, 2 different styles. Both of them were kind of anti Broadmane, anti-Flock lineups, except for this one again having the Alawi. So we'll say 5 out of 6 of the decks were anti-Broadmane, anti-Flock. So very cool. Very cool place to be. So what are some of the meta takeaways here and what to look forward in the future? So we saw that Norra kind of popped off. Broadmane decks are really good, but Broadmane is also easy to counter. We are in a very clear like meta triangle style thing, but there's 4-way triangle, square, octagon, whatever you want to call it, man. I don't know. But you have your go tall decks, which lose to your Flock decks and your anti Broadmane decks. But your go tall decks are going to beat all of these pressure decks. You have your pressure decks, which is, you have your pressure decks, which are going to beat all of the anti-Broadmane decks, but then again lose to Jax Alawi. You have your Broadmane decks, which is going to beat your go tall decks and your aggro pressure decks. And then you have your anti-Broadmane decks, which are also going to beat your go tall decks. So right now, I would highly recommend either playing a Broadmane deck, an anti-Broadmane deck, or finding a deck that beats both of them. At the moment, I don't really know what that is because these are 2 different styles of decks. One of these decks just kills off every single unit you play and kills off the big unit, so you need to aggro them down. And the other one, you just need to like aggro them down, but if you go like 2 wide playing a bunch of small units, then like all the Broadmane and the Norra decks are just gonna like infinitely block you and kill you. So because there are such different styles of decks, it would be very hard to kind of find a deck that beats both of them, like maybe a Zero Aurelia or something like that. Really not too sure. I do know that Tristana Teemo, I wanted to go over this. I wanted to go over these 3 most highest win rate decks. Tristana Teemo, I believe this is Atrocity Teemo. Yeah, Atrocity Tristana. So Atrocity Tristana has like 67% win rate yesterday. So it went down a little bit to 65.5. Then we have Tristana Norra. This is going to be a Reveler's Feast deck. Is also like chilling with a pretty decent win rate, 58.5%. Fearsome's is chilling with a decent win rate. Like Fearsome looks kind of silly. And then you have Norra with this just like absurd win rate. Yeah, Norra with this just like absolutely absurd win rate, 58% over like a bunch more matches than like some of these other decks. Like 571 takeaway, literally 3 times the amount of decks on it, or 3 times the amount of matches, and still very, very solid win rate. Yeah, so I'm interested to look at these 3 aggro decks and see how they do. Maybe these can beat the Broadmane decks, but I doubt it. I really don't think this deck ever beats Broadmane, the Tristana Norra. I don't think Tristana, I don't think this deck beats Broadmane either, but I don't think there's enough data. It says it does. It says it beats Broadmane decks. So it's very interesting, because if this deck beats Ryze and Broadmane and aggro, then like, fuck, maybe this deck is, the deck. And I will definitely be playing it this week. So if you want to see a deck guide on this and see me play it, test it out, let me know and I'll let you guys know. But yeah, deck looks very solid. So looking into the future cards, so future meta reads. I think Ryze is going to be very popular. I think Ryze is going to be the most popular tournament deck next weekend. So next weekend is going to be the Open, which I don't actually think will have stats on the Opens, which is gonna kind of suck. But I think Ryze will be the most popular deck next weekend. I think Reveler's Feast is so underrated. This deck does not have a home right now. I think Tristana is like the closest thing we have to it. I think simply because you can just go 6 wide on like turn 4 pretty consistently. But this card is like just like I cannot stress how like silly this card is. Like just not balanced in the slightest. It just needs a home. It just really needs a home. I'm thinking because of the like spell shield on the Hungry Owls is fine. The elusives you get here, maybe you could just play like Noxus elusives. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know what region would have enough elusives to do that, but maybe you just play like Noxus elusives and that could be a thing with Reveler's Feast. But Reveler's Feast is just like a super underexplored card, and it is very not balanced. And then Fearsome keyword is very high in stonks right now. Fearsome keyword, very good. I think it's the only real Soul Cleave deck. I don't think Soul Cleave is great. I think having the pressure of Soul Cleave here on your 4-drop on your Wraithcaller forces your opponent to always keep up mana to answer the Wraithcaller. Anytime they tap out and you have Wraithcaller, anytime they spend all their mana, you can just go like Soul Cleave your Wraithcaller, and then now you have 2 more elusives. So you essentially just pay 3 mana to get 2 giant Mistwraiths and also pump all your other Mistwraiths. So I think having this unblockable Q is really good. This deck is pretty like okay into the Norra decks just simply because Norra decks don't have blockers. It's good into the Jax decks because you just go too wide and they can't stop you. Again, like their cheap units aren't big enough to block. Like their 1s and 2-drop aren't big enough to block you. So they have to end up trading away their like champion, and like that's never good for them. And then of course this applies so much pressure that Ryze is just gonna like kill you, or sorry, you're just gonna kill Ryze because they just probably can't live long enough to do anything about it. I do think Harrowing's kind of bait, not gonna lie there. I think you probably want like 1 Harrowing, maybe 2, because let's check at the top players, see how many they're on. Oh, they're also on 3, but yeah, I'd probably just play like 1 or 2 Harrowing. This honestly could probably be a Reveler's deck. Like, I think if you just took out 2 of these Harrowings, added in 2 Revelers, or 2 Revel Feast, you're probably like big chillin'. This is probably like where I would start with trying to figure out Reveler stuff, because typically what happens is your opponent's only gonna have like a couple Fearsome blockers, and so they're just gonna like block like 1 or 2 of your units. You're gonna be like 5 or 6 wide. They're gonna block like 2 units, and then you can just like Reveler's Feast one of the blocked units that wasn't gonna get through anyways, and then you can just like kill them with the rest of your damage. I don't know, that'd be something I'd try. But yeah, I'd be on the lookout for those 3 decks. I think these 3 decks are really good, and then I think Broadmane isn't going anywhere, but 3x Broadmane decks are probably not it anymore. I think 3x Broadmane, I think the like 9x Broadmane decks was a very good meta call for this weekend, and I'm really happy for my team on that meta read. But I definitely don't think 9x Broadmane is going to be it for the future metas. I think like Norra BC Broadmane will still continue to be the best deck until meta shift. Best deck in the meta until the meta shifts. But I definitely don't think you're going to be bringing like Norra Swain and TF Katarina and Annie Ezreal to any more tournaments and expect to do well, because I think people are going to just like start beating ways to at least beat one of those decks. Yeah, so that's the takeaways for all the meta. I hope you guys enjoyed this style where I go over things in the notepad. If you didn't like it, if you think I make it take too long, let me know. Also going over the tournaments. I know this video is much longer than my other Meta Mondays, but it's because, you know, it's a new meta, so I wanted to go over all the new decks, kind of go in depth of what they do, kind of explain if you haven't seen them before, go over the tournaments in depth, and then also kind of give my thoughts on what the meta looks like, kind of explain to you guys what the meta looks like if you're not a super, you know, into it or read into these things really well. I'll give you like a little breakdown, tell you why some things are good, and then give you some future meta reads like this. And then it's also cool to look back and see if I was right. And then I could tell everyone that, hey, if you watched my Meta Monday, you would have known that I saw this coming, and then you can, you know, you should have had all the answers to watch my Meta Monday. But that's gonna be it for this Meta Monday. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Link will be down in the description to Runeterra.Ar. This is where I go to use all of my LoR stats. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Again, comment, let me know what deck's been working for you in ranked to let everyone know if you've hit Masters or whatever rank you've hit, how you've been doing with your deck, if it wasn't on these top 8 most popular, because I think a lot of people love the fringe decks, a lot of people love high win rate fringe decks. So if you could provide one of those, drop it down in the comments down below. That's going to be it for this video. Join the Discord, all that type of stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next video.